Hey folks, it is October the 2nd, and today we're going to go through some more of World War I. So make sure you got your note-taking material out and all that good stuff. Hey, wait a second. I knew we were missing somebody. Where's that Jamie girl at?
She quit.
She quit?
Yes.
Yeah, she's only been here like 2 times.
She got sent home again or something, or she went home again. I don't know if she was sent home, but I think she went home again.
Jeez, seems like everybody. All right, well, whatever. She'll be all right. Many prayers will be said. All right, so if you remember, the U.S. decides to get involved with this, what they called the European War. And of course, we had a lot of events leading up to this. We had the Zimmermann Telegraph, we had the sinking of the Lusitania, and of course, a lot of Americans felt more on the side with England. Now, this is where we ended off last time. And here we have Wilson's declaration of war. And the war really did happen. But don't worry, it ended. Wait, we talked about this one, right? Didn't we talk about the Zimmermann Telegraph?
Yeah, I was on the last one.
Yeah, this was the last one. My bad. Hey, there we go. So here's some U.S. troops. They were also called the Yanks, like Yankees, and also Doughboys. Apparently, something about their uniform made people call them Doughboys. I don't know the connection. Looking clean. All right. They got some knee-high boots. They got their trooper hats.
I did that boot camp.
You did boot camp?
Yeah, I was bad.
You were, okay. So, was it fun?
No.
Yeah, Mr. Hamilton did something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it, but I didn't. It was like,
Yeah, chair, Elisha. All right, man. So, World War I U.S. involvement. Like other nations of the First World War, the U.S. mobilized its entire nation towards the war effort. This is called total war. Now, something similar to this happened in the U.S. Civil War, but it wasn't quite to this extent. The North, for example, only a small amount of its population, actually male population of age, was actually required to go join the war effort. However, we see that in World War I, this is going to take over large segments of industry. We're going to see expansion of government and its spending. And we're also going to have a lot of people join the service. Though the nation encouraged it, businesses readily helped with war preparation. For example, U.S. industrial production increased by some 20%. Hello. Well, I got one student taking a makeup test. No. Yeah, sure, no problem. There you go, friend. So, you knew, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, she didn't tell me why, but they never tell me why. All right.
Can I go to?
Good thing, like.
Uh-oh.
May I go to?
Yeah, like after class. All right, so U.S. industries are getting involved. A lot of them pledge to up production, to start making efforts like voluntarily to help out with the war. There's a lot of patriotism going on now. Popular music and plays, and novels, and all these things were really like drumming up patriotism, kind of like at 9/11. I guess you could say. I wasn't in America in 9/11, but I heard there was a lot of patriotism afterwards. Henry, can you put your phone up for me? Like up and away like Superman? You're using it for this? Okay, that's fine. That's fine. All right, so other efforts to aid the war, such as adoption of daylight savings time in order to conserve fuel. You know how like we have spring forward, fall back, and we have to adjust our clocks. A lot of this was done for 2 reasons. One is railroad companies were kind of pushing for this because they'd already pushed for standardized time across the nation, because choo-choo trains have to have exact scheduling. Otherwise, you could have train wrecks because they might have to share the same track, and as long as the schedule's right, you can get the train off the track before the next one comes. So they're going to move and help out with standardized time across America. But then daylight savings time is an effort to save kerosene, because most people's lights, even though their electricity was becoming more of a big thing, we're seeing kerosene is something that's used for lamps and lanterns to provide light in the night. But soldiers need this for the war effort. So daylight savings time helps the nation use less of it in its peaceful purposes. Unions, who, as you remember, we had worker strikes and things like that. Workers' unions had pledged to, you can have it, just keep it down, had pledged to not strike, as to not interrupt industry or have to divert troops, just like break up fights and stuff like that. We're going to see an increase of taxes and something called Liberty Loan drives. Liberty loans are essentially like a bond. Y'all know what a government bond is? It's where you can buy a little piece of paper from the government, and it's like they're taking a loan from you. They're like, hey, you buy a loan, you buy they buy, like, you get a $500 bond. You give the government $500, and they promise to give you $550 back in like 10 years or something like that. So you make interest, but you can't collect it for a long time. It's a way for the government to get temporary money for emergencies and war. So, sometimes they'll use them as prizes at like academic competitions and stuff like that. Like if you go do like my wife used to do like the academic rodeo stuff and all that. And whenever she'd win, she'd get little bonds, little $50 or $100 or something like that. All right, so the prominent mining engineer Herbert Hoover, we're going to hear more about Herbert Hoover later, was appointed as Wilson's food administrator. So he's a self-made man who's going to pull himself up from humble roots, and he's going to be very good at business and organization. And he's going to make himself into a millionaire. But he's also going to be a rather patriotic guy. And so in this position, he's going to help with food relief for our European allies, because a lot of the war is being done in fields that were traditionally used to make food for a lot of Europe. The fields of Germany and France, where a lot of people got their wheat for their bread. And so a lot of people, there wasn't in the Western Front terrible starvation like there was in Russia at this time, but there was a lot of hunger. So the United States, because we had no abundance of grain, remember, our farmers couldn't sell enough of it, so they wound up going bankrupt. Now they had a place for it to go. Food shipments to allies tripled as farmers found new markets, and the nation practiced meatless Mondays and wheatless Wednesdays. Just like daylight savings time, we're trying to reduce our consumption here to help out with our allies and with our soldiers overseas to make sure they had more. And so this is like a form of rationing. The past couple of U.S. wars, we haven't had rationing. But a lot of wars we do. Like World War II was very famous for its rationing. There were certain things you couldn't buy ordinarily, like rubber and things like that. And we'll get to more on that later. So yeah, it was a war where everybody had to pay a price. Everybody. How do you get food delivered here, Kayla? Did you do like Uber Eats or something like that?
No.
See, I'm confused.
I got connections. I think I was illegal.
You said something over here.
Don't care.
Hmm?
She bought food for a teacher also. So, I don't know.
Okay.
Every
That's no
time
judgment.
brings me food, they're like, don't do that again.
I'm sorry.
What is Miss Donna doing? She got on me earlier when we talked about it. I was just like, every single day you got food. And I told you, you gotta stop doing it. Like, she's joking around. She's with Johnson. Miss Johnson and everything. And it's like, I know she's not being mean or anything. And then I was like, but I didn't go up there yesterday. She was like, wow, the first day in how long? And she just told me to be quick. Because she's like, because we can both get in trouble. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can't have y'all like hanging out in the parking lot and stuff like that. We're driving off.
Who we gonna hang out with? Everyone's in here.
Yeah, right. Well, strangers, right? Stranger danger. We don't know everybody out there. What about like the people who dwell in the woods dwellers? Could be a dangerous hobo out
Can we
there.
have our test back now?
In a minute, we got the recording on. Yeah, after we're done with the lecture. Hey, y'all ready for the next one?
Yes.
All right, good. All right. Hey, here we have a lovely picture of no man's land. So there's so much fighting going on, so much explosive artillery, machine gun fire, and stuff like that. You can see that the countryside is just laid waste. There's these craters that make these ponds where you have stagnant,
And they're-
putrid water in
They're
it.
still there too.
Yeah, some of the, especially the, like, there's
Especially
some
the
huge
mines.
ones.
The mines that maybe are still there that they forgot to pick up.
And the thing is, in a lot of these regions up here, yeah, sometimes like farmers will still find unexploded bombs.
And they're still active. I mean, like,
Yeah, when I was in Italy, sometimes they would have to cordon parts of the city we were in, Vicenza, because they would find World War II bombs that weren't exploded. And somehow after all of that time, they're still finding artillery shells.
that's why I want to go to
Mines and
Normandy
stuff.
because I want to have like a souvenir from over there. Like, is it Normandy, right?
Yeah. And a lot of people still go over there with like metal detectors, looking for artifacts and stuff like that.
I want to go
Because-
there.
Because yeah, like you had the beaches, and of course you also
But you
had
need
the
special
Eldorado
permission,
Drop.
right?
Not sure, I never been.
Because I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there. I mean, like,
Yeah.
they can't just all take it all and just say like, "Oh, this is ours now." I mean,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not sure how it works. I'm sure that there's some kind of laws about it because you got to remember that's France, and they've got their own laws there. But if it's like war remains from like a country, like then it would probably have to, if you found like something that was precious to like a soldier, their family might want it.
Mhm.
They might have claim to it. But hey, moving right along. Yes, sir.
So what question is you last time?
Okay.
And something.
Okay.
When they found the bomb,
Mhm.
and they had all the police and all these people were there just to get it out.
San Antonio.
No, El Salvador.
Oh, El Salvador. Oh, they said something. Oh man.
Oh my god.
Yeah. I mean, it's serious.
It's like big. Big.
Phone or bomb?
A bomb.
A bomb.
Bomb. Yeah. So yeah, it depends on what they make it out of because there's some things if it's that big, it could take out like a big area, and there's some things where it might burn a car. So it's dangerous though because a lot of times they're unstable and go off when you don't want it to. All right, so during the war, many Americans experienced violations in their civil liberties. So your civil liberties are your rights that are outlined in, say, like the Bill of Rights, right? Civil liberty is something you're born with. So every major war or major national tragedy, you see a shrinking of this, a restriction of it. And of course, it's going to happen in our first giant major international conflict, being World War I. German Americans were often targeted for vigilante justice. So they're Americans. Many of them have been in America for multiple generations, but because they were of German ancestry, our enemy in this war, they often were discriminated against, beat up, fired from jobs, or people would boycott their stores and things like that. Congress would pass a couple of laws that would further restrict people's rights. It would pass the Espionage Act of 1917, which could penalize people for interfering with the draft or encouraging disloyalty in the U.S. So during this time period, you still had a little bit of a socialist movement. And the socialist movement were usually run by people who were sworn pacifists. And so this is before you start having communist countries pop up. So it was more of an idea than something that had been really tried out. And so some leading socialists in America, like Eugene Debs and stuff like that, would protest the war and ask people to not participate, pay taxes, and things like that. So the Espionage Act's like, wow, you're helping the enemy by doing that, so you could go to jail. The Sedition Act of 1918 extended these penalties to anyone who abused the government in writing. So if you wrote an essay or say like a newspaper piece or a pamphlet or a book that criticized the government, you could go to jail for that. So that's the First Amendment right there. So we see restriction in people's rights. When these laws were challenged as unconstitutional, the Supreme Court stated that freedom of speech was never absolute. So they're saying it didn't go in all things, just some. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. stated that just as one was not allowed to falsely yell fire in a theater, they were not allowed to endanger national security. So what they're saying is there's certain restrictions in your First Amendment. You can't say things that will get people hurt. If you yell fire in a theater, people panic and they might trample to death innocent people.
It's like that one time when the president was, I don't know but someone yelled something.
Oh yeah, they yelled
at
at. Yeah, it was like Trump just got out of the plane and whatever, and then someone yelled "Allah Akbar."
I don't
And
remember
then
that.
his guards just covered him, and then everyone was just like screaming.
Yeah, I don't remember that. What
There
again?
was a fire at a music hall and like there was a fire because like the
Yeah.
lights couldn't happen with the lights. It was like a really
Yeah.
big thing. You might know what I'm talking about, but, like, and everybody, there was barely any survivors because so many people they trampled everybody where they were since they were all congested, nobody could get out through the doors.
Yeah, they'll stack the bodies in the hallway, can't get out,
Yeah.
and they all burn up. It's sad. Yeah, there was what was it? I think there was this terrorist attack in Paris like some years ago. And yeah, they went in there with like grenades, assault rifles, and yeah, so many people panicked. They their bodies like blocked the doorways, and so the bad guys just went around through there. Yeah, it was terrible, terrible. Yeah, so which goes to show you got to keep your calm, right, and know where the exits are. But yeah, he's saying this Supreme Court justice says you can't endanger national security. So by law, he's saying at the Supreme Court, you can't say things that could hurt the nation. So these are new restrictions on the First Amendment. As many men went to join the war effort, women often found opportunities to fill new open positions in the workforce. Not as much as World War II, but we are going to start seeing it. So we're not seeing it in like car factories and stuff like that, or airplane factories like we will in World War II, but we are seeing an opening. You ready to move on to the next one? Rebecca, you okay? Okay. Oh, wait, wrong computer. I keep pressing the wrong computer. All right. Same picture. All right. So before the war, around 90% of all African Americans lived in the South. So once again, we're talking about things that are changing at home that have to do with people's responses to or changes in their civil liberties. So that's almost all Black people lived in the South. By 1920, 500,000 of them will move to the North in what's called the Great Migration. And so the reason for this is because a lot of the people are trying to escape the Jim Crow laws and things like that are restricting their freedom and essentially trying to make them live in a way as if they were still slaves, even though most of these people were born well after the end of slavery. Also, you remember you had the rise of the new Ku Klux Klan, and they were more violent and bigger than the old one. And people were like, I got to get myself and my family out of here. Another reason is the economic opportunities of the North, the newly industrialized North with factories that have good wages was opening up. And now that many of those workers went to the service, went to the military, more jobs opened up for them. So in the South, they might make 50 cents a day. In the North, they can make $3 a day. That's a huge increase. That's a lot of cash compared to where they were. Kayla, what you doing? good. Unfortunately for these folks, racism was not solely a Southern trait as shown in Illinois in 1917. There's going to be a massive race riot there where you're going to have a lot of the white Northerners go out and burn down the homes of many African Americans. A lot of it had to do with they were afraid that they were taking their jobs. And we're going to find later on during civil rights movement, it's going to be up in the North in Illinois and Chicago. We're going to have people like Martin Luther King say that that's the time where they're their scaredest. It's not in the South. It's actually in the North. It's where they're going to find that things get the most violent as far as racism goes. So in this riot, you have the death of 39 African Americans, and around 6,000 of them lost their homes.
So,
Yeah.
So where did they have like more slavery and stuff like that? South and
Yeah, it was in the South. It was in the South. Yeah, you would call that institutionalized racism because it was legal. It was the law was there for hurting certain races. You know what I'm saying? But in the North, they didn't have slavery, but they still had racism. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
There was still racism. It wasn't as much as in the South.
No, there was. There was just as much. I really think so. It's just they didn't have certain things like slavery, and they did have laws as far as like where people could live, but things like segregation wasn't quite as enforced. You know what I'm saying? Like they didn't have as many of the separate bathrooms. Though there were places like that, or the separate restaurants and stuff. There were separate schools though. It was like integration like that. It didn't happen that often yet. You had your hand up?
I was asking my sister about that.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell them Kayla got canes. No, don't say that.
I'm gonna ask my dad if he can bring me some.
All right, so despite this, all of these adversities, about 500,000 African Americans served in the armed forces during World War I. Now, they're not going to serve, there will be black units. A lot of African Americans in the service are going to do more of the menial jobs like cooks and, digging trenches and stuff like that. They're not going to be so much the frontline troops very often. Super. I don't remember why I picked that picture. Oh yeah, the Red Cross. That's right. So yeah, we're going to see the growth and invention of something called the Red Cross, something still around today for disaster relief, but also for helping out military members and stuff like that away from home. They also try to help out with prisoners of war to make sure that they're being cared for and they have certain things to try to make them a little more comfortable or at least safe. So continuing on, World War I, U.S. involvement. By April of 1917, the U.S. Army and National Guard had only 372,000 men. So, like the U.S. Army, just think of it like that was the full-time Army. And the National Guard are part-timers, but they're there at the behest of the government or the governor. So every state has its own National Guard, and the governor is its commander-in-chief, except for in times of emergency when the president can nationalize them. So a month later, Congress passed the Selective Service Act. This is the draft. If you're a male when you're 18, you have to register for selective service because if Congress ever activates this, you could be put into the military, even against your will. But by law, you have to sign up for this. This law required all U.S. male citizens ages 21 to 30, and now it's 18 to 45, to register for boards that would determine whether or not they should be drafted into the service. 24 million registered, and 2.8 of those million were drafted. This would be 72% of the entire U.S. Army. So almost the entire fighting force, the Army, was draftees. These are guys who are told you have to go to the service. So they go. They don't necessarily volunteer, which means other small percent are people who are already in it or people who volunteered on their own accord. But it's going to be a small base of the military that's going to have to train all of these newbies coming in. And that was a pretty common thing back then. You're going to see this again in Vietnam and II. At the end of the war, the Navy, Army, and Marines would add up to 4.8 million people. Though women could not be drafted, as in forced to be in, 13,000 joined. Most were in clerical positions, so we're talking about office aides and things like that, and secretaries, managing paperwork. However, 18,000 women would join the Army Corps of Nurses, so that's the medical field, to help out with the war effort. And even more would serve in the Red Cross. And so the Red Cross is helping out with medicine and stuff. They're helping out, make sure guys getting the mail. They're helping out with trying to provide sometimes even entertainment and stuff like that for troops, medicine, things like that, like warm meals and stuff. Here, I think we got enough time to do a couple more. Hmm?
Why is so quiet?
Because there's a class level, we go home, that's why it's quiet.
It's too quiet.
I'm sorry.
It's too quiet.
Sorry, your table is covered in stuff. I was like, oh
Whoa.
my God. It's just like covered.
This is great.
You could live in a table.
It's like,
Live
you
on
know,
it.
I make my little nest in there.
The picture she has in her room.
Oh,
The
the
McDonald's.
McDonald's.
Oh,
That was me in Sabri's class last year. I like,
Who
always
did
like,
maintenance class?
huh?
Who did maintenance class?
Honestly, it's really quiet. He's sitting there like, hey, all you hear is.
Or you know, a bag
Or
opening.
the crunching of the bag of Cheetos. Like,
Just grazing. All right, humans. Y'all ready for the next one? Maybe. Okay. That's not very affirmative. But yeah, next week I want to give y'all a quiz. I haven't made up my mind exactly how I'm going to do it yet.
I just wanted to.
Oh,
Maybe
when
Thursday.
Started.
Jimmy's here. I'll meet her.
And the reason is because that we need, in order to make sure your grades are more balanced, and so that the test isn't like, if you have negative tests, it's not so impactful on it, is we need to have some quizzes. The quizzes tend to be a little bit easier, provided you're looking at certain things. It's going to be more vocabulary based, and hopefully it'll help people out. And hopefully it'll help get you ready for your other tests later.
Look, I have a question.
Okay.
So, okay, whenever Germany sent the telegraph or
The Zimmerman telegram.
yeah, that was, so they basically offered up
Mhm.
the United States to Mexico where they had.
Yeah,
no
about a
rights
good
in.
quarter of it. Yeah,
But they had no, they couldn't do that.
they
Why?
could. Well, yeah, they couldn't, but they were. I don't know what support they would have offered Mexico.
They couldn't promise that because it's not theirs to give away.
Yeah. So you're right.
Oh.
But there's an element in Mexico who were like, in the Mexican-American War, they felt like stolen from them, and they wanted it back. And they're like, hey, here's your chance. America's going to be distracted. Why don't you go ahead and get it? So
Oh, so they were like offering it as theirs to give, and they were like, hey, well, okay.
yeah, they're trying to play them, right? So, and Mexico was like, that's stupid. No. Because, well, remember, Mexico, not only did they not want to have a war, they were still fighting a civil war, essentially. So, I mean, it just didn't make any sense. It's pretty tone deaf. So, in June of 1917, the first American Expeditionary Force, this is what they're calling our soldiers going in there. That's like the overarching name for it, the AEF, otherwise known as the Yanks, arrived in France with their commander, General John J. Pershing. So Pershing is the leader of American troops in World War I. He's the head guy. At this time, it appears as though the Central Powers could win. The Central Powers is another term we're using for the Triple Alliance led by Germany, and defeat the Allies before the AEF, American Expeditionary Forces, could even enter the war. So we were worried we couldn't even get there fast enough before the enemy won. The French had faced a massive defeat when they launched a failed offensive in April. So they tried to get out of the trenches. They tried to gain ground. However, the Germans were able to drive them back, making a massive amount of casualties on the French. So they were badly crippled. The British had also suffered enormous casualties in Flanders. For only a small gain in territory. So once again, the British, they're able to have some success, but the amount of human cost to just gain a little bit of ground in this industrialized war with all the artillery, the barbed wire, the trenches, the machine guns, it just didn't seem worth it. Later that year, Italians also suffered major defeats against the Germans. So, and I've actually been through some tunnels and bunkers and things like that Italians made for World War I. So, like it really was like all of Europe was fighting. Russia had also withdrew from Eastern Front in 1917, allowing the Germans to bring those troops to the Western Front. So we're going to see that Germany's fighting a two-front war. If you remember, they're fighting over here. They're fighting British and French. They're having some problems with the Italians, but they're not that worried. But they're having another front against the Russians. They want to use the troops that are fighting the Russians to gang up on France. The thing is, how they do that is that Russia is facing a lot of hardships, that people are going hungry. The Tsar at this time, Tsar Nicholas, he's not all that popular. He's had a lot of bad press against him. He's seen as kind of like an idiot, or people see him as not really caring, or even being like smart enough to run such a big empire. And so, and he's had a lot of bad family press. People had rumors that his wife was cheating on him with a magician and all this other stuff. And so you have these political agitation groups, these revolutionaries come up. One of them was Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks, who were communist. He's eventually going to do some time as house arrest. It's going to cause more trouble, and he's going to be exiled, kicked out of Russia. So he goes to Germany. The Germans sneak this revolutionary back into Russia. And when he does so, it's going to cause such a disturbance that the Russians are going to dethrone their king, the emperor, the Tsar. And they're going to try to make a Western-style democracy. When they do this, Russia will be so destabilized, the Bolsheviks, with just a handful of armed men, are going to take over the government and convert the country into communist, just like that, with just a handful of armed men. But because they do this, they're going to take Russia out of the war. Russia will make a peace treaty with Germany, and now Germany can put all of its troops on the Western Front. So it's pretty smart. I mean, if you're fighting somebody, instead of fighting them, why not just make them fight themselves? And that's what the Germans did. And so, yeah, Russia will enter into a civil war. You have the Reds, who are the Bolsheviks, the communists, versus the Whites, who are the old school Russians. So at this time, because we were involved in World War I, nobody really wanted to help out with Russia. It was too much of a problem. Yeah. So I think we're going to go over one more after this, and we'll call it a day. You tired? I should have opened the blinds. I think. Yeah, if you want to. Yeah, just don't careful with that flower thing. It'll fall usually. Now you don't pull it. You
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, Mr. Whitener.
Yeah.
I don't like so much just
turn it down.
in the lights.
I guess. Yeah, as long as I'm getting some sunlight in here. Yeah.
Next slide, the picture.
Huh?
Next slide, the picture.
A
All the
picture.
way, all the way.
Oh, no, the next slide.
We'll leave it there.
Okay.
Right.
Right. All right. Are y'all ready for the last one?
Yes.
All right, get set.
Brighter than the future.
Let's see. All right, so wow. Hey, so you see this map here? You have the battle lines drawn up in France, and so remember, on this side, we have our side. We have America, Britain, France. On this other side is where you have Austria, mostly German. So you see the battle line there. It's moving. And of course, keep in mind, these are those trenches we're talking about. So in July of 1918, we see the battle line is very deep into France. And then it's going to move forward and forward more up to November, where it's right there up to Belgium and very, very close to Germany itself. So there is going to be some breaking open at this time. So with this new momentum, they got momentum because they defeated England to a stalemate. They defeated the French. They got rid of the Russians. Now they're able to put all of their war effort onto one side. But the problem is this war had gone on for so long is that the Germans had expended a lot of their men, a lot of their industrial power. If they would have done this earlier in the war, they probably actually would have won. In Picardy, the Germans attacked with 64 divisions. A German division at this time was 17,000 and a half men. So this is a massive, massive amount of human fighting men coming across all in one movement. They broke through the British and French lines. The German advancement stalled 50 miles from Paris. So just like the Franco-Prussian War before this, Germany almost captured Paris again. This caused the citizens of that city to panic and the government. Many people fled with their belongings. All available troops rushed to the front, including this time Americans. 310,000 AEF, American Expeditionary Forces, who fought in the Marne River and suffered 67,000 dead and wounded. Despite this major setback, the Allies launched a major counteroffensive as American troops came into France, bolstering the Allies' numbers to over 1 million troops. So some historians say that it's because America came in when they did, it turned the war around. Right when the Allies needed a boost. They were low on men, low on supplies. They were losing badly, but fortunately we were able to come in and help turn things around. September 1918, General Pershing insisted that the Americans launch its own offensive. So now our general, our commander of troops, is saying that now it's time for Americans to show that we can launch, we can fight. Now, a lot of soldiers, when they were coming in, were warning us Americans is like, hey, the way that warfare works here, you cannot expose your troops. You have to be careful. Dying happens often and easily. But we had a lot of guys who were ready to go get some, ready to go tear up some Huns. So, and we're going to talk a bit about that when we come back next week. So it's going to be our last slide for the day. We're going to go ahead and end the lecture here for the live stream, kids. So see you on Tuesday and all that good stuff.